This is Sg2 Perspectives, a conversation with Sg2 experts and industry thought leaders about the biggest trends in healthcare and what we expect that's going to mean for the future of healthcare delivery.
Another thing that is important to understand when you're scaling a program like this is that it's not just the clinical aspects you need to be aware of. It's also what infrastructure and what are the operational needs that you need to have in order to support such a program.
Hello and welcome to Sg2 Perspectives. I'm your host, Tori Richie. Today we are continuing our deep dive into the impact of change forecast, focusing on our next impact factor, innovation and technology. To further explore this topic, I am joined by three of our service line experts, Setu Shah, Kara Marlatt, and Gurmeet Bawa. Great to have the three of you here today.
Great, thanks for having us.
And in tech is an impact factor that I have a lot of fun with. It's all of the new shiny objects that we get to think about how new therapies, new treatment technologies are going to transform care delivery. I'm curious, entering the 2025 forecast, what new innovation stood out and got you the most excited? Gurmeet, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Tori. Innovation is one of those things where it's just exciting and it's built in everywhere. Being part of Sg2 and being part of multiple service lines, one of the areas that's really interesting is within spine. We see minimally invasive surgical approaches and technologies that are helping to enable that site of care shift in spine surgery. We see technology advancements and artificial disc replacement that will shift some of the lumbar fusion volume to alternative approaches, such as motion preservation procedures. Another exciting technology advancement, which has the potential to also impact spinal fusion volumes, is regenerative medicine. There are some early stage clinical trials occurring right now that are focused on treating single-level lumbar disc degeneration. If successful, then this could actually impact spinal fusion procedures for the treatment of degenerative disc diseases. The timing and magnitude of the therapy is still yet to be determined, but it's definitely something to keep on your radar.
Love that. Thanks, Gurmeet. Setu, Kara, from a cancer perspective, what was the most exciting innovation that you incorporated into the forecast this year?
We've been tracking the radiation, specifically the radiopharmaceutical therapy side, for some time. And for the first time this year, we've started to look for it and look for growth outside of where it's lived traditionally. So prostate, neuroendocrine, these will move in earlier lines of therapy. But we also looked at new tumor types like renal cancer, where this therapeutic as well as diagnostic component is helping to better see and treat the disease. Think of it as targeted therapy, but in radiation form. And so that targeted therapy procedure in combination with imaging techniques was really sort of exciting for us this year in moving outside of the original tumor types.
Could you talk a bit about how you have to balance perhaps ideas or feelings of grandeur with reality, even if this technology exists, even if a new pharmaceutical offering becomes available, what the rate of adoption is and how you work through that decision-making process?
Tori, in cancer, there are so many therapies and there are so many innovations, but they don't all make it to front lines. Assessing, understanding what does the impact factor, what does the outcome show, and what is the feasibility of it actually not only being approved, but actually being utilized in an impactful way. And so that not only is considering innovation, it's considering reimbursement, it's considering payers, program development. A lot of the innovations and therapeutic advancements in cancer care require a strong and expert team, ranging from nurses to pharmacy to oncologists. As we're developing the advancements in this space, it's only possible if those teams truly understand what they're delivering, how they're delivering it, and how it'll impact the patient. Balancing these components is pretty critical as part of our forecast thinking.
Setu, you remind me of what we're seeing within the neurosciences with the new therapeutic amyloid targeting therapeutics that have emerged in the recent years for Alzheimer's disease. We are seeing that there's large disparities in the Alzheimer's disease drug uptake among U.S. Medicare beneficiaries. Just because the drug is out there does not necessarily mean that there is access. And a lot of times we need to build that access as well as the follow-up services that are going to be needed. For instance, with these amyloid targeting therapeutics, you're going to need to have a PET scan that's going to be done, and that's used as an initial diagnostic. Then you're going to also need MRIs that are required for treatment monitoring for side effects. When we're thinking about these new therapeutics that are coming out, you have to understand that there's going to be program elements that are going to need to be baked in to be able to keep the patient within the care continuum and make sure that they're able to get all the support services required for that therapeutic.
Gurmeet, you raised such an important point and consideration of it goes beyond just, does the drug exist? Does the surgical technique exist? And when I think about the backlogs and the access challenges that imaging centers in particular have faced, that feels like a barrier to entry for being able to scale the adoption of some of these new therapeutic techniques.
Yes, especially with the Alzheimer's drug therapeutics, those imaging scans are required. The MRIs are required, they're ongoing monitoring. And so having access to that imaging is very critical for the treatment pathway.
That's actually an excellent point because in a conversation with the Cancer Center, as they were thinking about that theranostics and radiopharmaceutical therapy projection, they had a really bold projection using our Sg2 forecast, and they pulled it back as a result of their imaging capacities. To your point, there are core programmatic functions that use our forecast as levers. There are directionality in their purposes, but depending on your market dynamics can be very different, as well as program capacity.
What this actually points to is that for a lot of the high cost drugs and really the therapeutics, especially in the cancer space, that some of these are incredibly expensive. And there's a lot that goes into delivering some of these therapeutics to a patient. It's incredibly complex to coordinate all of the different departments and the service lines and everything to bring a new therapeutic to a patient. But not every single patient is going to be able to get access to these.
Yeah. Gurmeet, we've started to dive a bit deeper into imaging access. And Gurmeet, you are our resident imaging expert. What additional information should we be considering as we talk about scaling and embedding new technologies into our workflows?
What we're seeing is that with the sites of care, with imaging, they're shifting over because we're seeing that there's a shift toward bringing the technology to the patient rather than bringing the patient to the technology. And that's really supported by the adoption and advances in portable imaging technology. So you're talking MRI, CT, ultrasound. And one thing that we do see is we see mobile imaging technology. Those types of mobile imaging technologies, they're being integrated into a wide range of screening programs, and that can span such areas as breast cancer, lung cancer, and cardiovascular disease. They're really positively reshaping that screening program by increasing access, improving patient engagement, enabling earlier detection, and also enhancing the overall effectiveness of public health initiatives.
Shifting gears a bit, gene therapy is a huge area of interest and conversation for the Cancer Service Line team. Kara, could you ground us in some of the key lessons learned when thinking about how to grow gene therapy adoption or scale gene therapy adoption across the cancer landscape?
This is a topic that's always top of mind for organizations that are considering building out a program like this. And it's very much a tall order. Setu and I are in conversations a lot with our Vizient pharmacy colleagues, and we actually just attended several months ago the second annual Vizient Cell and Gene Therapy Symposium. And that was very eye-opening because a couple of things really came to the surface when they're thinking about building a program. So all of these frontline providers came to the table. They were sharing different ideas for how they're bringing these services to life and what it means to grow a certain program. They talked about how important it is to honestly over-communicate with one another and that collaboration is incredibly key. It's not just one department that's responsible for bringing a therapy like this on board. We're talking legal needs to be involved, payers need to be involved, pharmacy needs to be involved, and it's really important to have the CFO, the CEO, so many other departments involved so that things don't fall through the cracks because you're moving a lot of money around to pay for these therapies to save patients' lives. Another thing that is important to understand when you're scaling a program like this is that it's not just the clinical aspects you need to be aware of, it's also what infrastructure and what are the operational needs that you need to have in order to support such a program. You have to think through things like OR access. You need to think about how you are creating different connectors across the care continuum and coordinate a person's care. You need to think about inpatient and outpatient bed capacity. There's all of these things that are coming top of mind that go even just beyond the clinical side of treating a patient.
Thinking about inpatient capacity, as well as the revenue, the financial side of cellular therapy, that's driving a lot of the conversation and at least interest in understanding what is the promise of delivering these in an outpatient setting, and recognizing that as a system, we may be strapped for capacity, operationally significantly complex to deliver an outpatient setting, but the financial outlook is looking a little bit more promising. This can look extremely variable. At the Vizient Cell and Gene Specialty Symposium, some organizations were about doing 75% of their CAR T in the outpatient setting, whereas others hadn't even started down that path. So it's still extremely variable, and variable because it depends on what is that internal drive from a system to do this, what is the level of physician champion, and how are we able to coordinate all these services across that system of care. Because once a patient leaves your hospital four walls, you lose that direct line of sight to them. And it requires a lot of different other type of mechanisms like triage, maybe a call center, potentially even remote monitoring. These are things we've had some infrastructure in, but we're still trying to rapidly develop as this onset to outpatient cellular therapy.
Those lessons learned are applicable to all service lines. Cancer is such a good one because of the shifts that are occurring with the increased medicalization of patients and new pharmaceuticals that are available. But when we think about some of the shifts that are playing out more broadly across the care continuum, everybody is impacted. And we need to be thinking about how do we scale that infrastructure? How do we better surround our patients with those support services that they need to ensure that that care pathway is well defined and easy to navigate?
So like basically transporting, some of the imaging equipment in rural areas and enabling access. I can touch on that a little bit, but that falls under the umbrella of mobile imaging technologies that I mentioned earlier. But I'm not really sure outside of that how it can contribute. But Kara, please.
But I figured like if there was something where, because that kind of brings us into the notion that care is shifting outpatient. With this outpatient shift, part of what's driving that shift to care in the outpatient setting is that patients are increasingly wanting their care closer to where they live, so care closer to home. Even though more specialized surgeries or different procedures or whatnot might be done in a more centralized hub, so maybe further away from where a person lives, a lot of that follow-up care, patients are going to want that ongoing continued support more locally where they are. Patients have a lot of things that are going on in their life. Anything that organizations can do to make that lift a little bit easier. And when we're talking about cancer, patients are dealing with so many other things. They have careers, they might be in school, they're caring for family members, children, partners, relatives. Anything that we can do to meet the patients where they're at is incredibly important. And patients are telling us, consumers are telling us that they want care closer to home.
Kara, you remind me of something very similar with dementia care. When we talk about patient management and care coordination for dementia services, that is very important to have that ongoing care. And one area that we see digitally enabled solutions that are helping to bridge the gap and have care team navigators connect directly with patients and caregivers. So they are informed and they stay within the continuum of care and they don't miss treatments. A lot of the work is actually between patient appointments. Having that virtual health model there is very beneficial for patients and caregivers.
Yeah, and that works to retain the patients that you have, which is also a big challenge as well.
So we've hit on gene therapy. We've hit on bringing technology closer to patients. We've hit some on access side of care shifts. Anything that you feel we have missed? I want to shift our focus to the elephant in the room, AI. What do you all think? Are the robots coming for our jobs? What is your stance on AI and how it will be embedded into the healthcare landscape?
What the survey revealed was that there was growth in clinical use that's spanning neuroimaging, thoracic, emergency, general radiology, cardiovascular, and musculoskeletal areas. But there's also growth in non-clinical uses that spanned clinical productivity, billing coding, exam assignments, and prior authorization. While I was at RSNA last December, there was a fantastic presentation from a radiologist based in New Zealand. And it highlighted his organization's adoption of AI. What was very interesting about it was how they evaluated the use of AI through certain success metrics. And that really included read time, radiologist turnover, agreement rate, and patient satisfaction. Overall, they found that a 15% reduction in read time and also an increased radiologist to AI agreement rate, which was very significant. The take home of that presentation was that you need to really identify those certain success metrics and build a framework around them to prove the value in utilizing AI for your organization.
Kara, Setu, what would you add?
From a cancer perspective, there's clinical uses, there's non-clinical uses. I'll ground us in the clinical use case for lung cancer. This has definitely come up a lot more recently, specifically looking at using AI for non-clinical use and being able to better prioritize patients. Gurmeet talked a little bit earlier about virtually or digitally enabled solutions. He talked a little bit about navigation. And navigators and navigation is a core function of oncology care. And when we think about AI tools, their ability to prioritize, predict, a lot of the end users of these AI tools end up being a nurse navigator or a care coordinator who is leading the functions of a screening program, a nodule clinic, or even connecting the patients for that first appointment. And so when we think about the adoption AI, we've considered the fact that this could potentially lead to more downstream or more organized cases of being able to identify more early stage cancers. If we are given the workforce technology to be able to prioritize their workload, this may offer a greater opportunity to direct patients to the right course of care. Another area primed for this is pancreatic cancer. We don't have a screening test for this. This can often be diagnosed very late. Northwell Health actually last year at ASCO showed an example of highlighting how AI can be used to improve access to care. Gurmeet highlighted the quality of AI, and now we're looking at, as we think, if we are certain about the quality of AI, what can it do programmatically, strategically? Can it help reduce that time to first biopsy, time to first treatment, and really help with that overall early detection? Select use cases across cancer care, but definitely a conversation as well.
At the last ASCO meeting, just a couple of weeks ago in Chicago, a couple of the physicians had highlighted that the real change that's required to utilize AI is really the change management. So it's things like getting clinicians on board and how workflows are going to be altered. It's how they're going to embrace digital transformation in general and adopt new tools. I think it was highlighted that there are many providers that they're interested in using AI, but they haven't actually started using it yet. So it's the change management part that is going to be required to actually upscale this. Another comment was that for organizations that are utilizing AI a little bit more, there's still a little bit of fear in some aspects of what this will do for job security and things like that. But it's not just for cancer. Ultimately, AI and these sort of technologies, they're not going to replace things like care navigators or anything like that, because as one of the physicians at ASCO had highlighted, and I love this quote, at the end of the day, some patients are scared and they just need a hug, and AI can't do that for them.
I think that that's a perfect way to wrap us. Innovation is here to augment our clinical workflows. Innovation is here to allow us to treat a more complex and broader patient population, but there is no replacing the human capital that keeps the machine running. Gurmeet, Setu, Kara, thank you so much for joining today and sharing your insights.
Thanks for listening. If you like this episode, please subscribe, rate, and review us, and or follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn at Sg2 Healthcare. And if you want to talk more about innovative healthcare strategies, you can always email me at sg2perspectives@sg2.com. Finally, SG2 is a Vizient company, and there are a bunch of Vizient podcasts that you might like. You can find them at Vizient /podcasts. Have a great day.